Let's talk about the most exciting part of the paramotor, and that is the engine or the power plant. Motors range in all sizes from very small, below 100 cc, to very large, like 250 cc's. These motors are very high performing motors, so you get a lot of power for the weight. This, for example, weighs 13.5 kilograms for the whole motor assembly and produces about 26 to 28 horsepower. That's amazing for something that you can just throw on your back. That's a lot of power. These motors are tuned very highly, so this one runs, for example, at 8,000 RPMs. The lifespan of a motor can range dramatically. You can go from, some motors, if they're lemons, they don't last very long, below 100 hours. Some motors can last upwards of 500 hours before they have any catastrophic failures or needing to be rebuilt. Just for a context of 500 hours, that's a lot of flying time. That's a lot of days in the air. But if you keep good track of the maintenance, you do the recommended manufacturer updates, for example, pistons being replaced at increments and things like that, a motor can last you a very long time and operate safely. So this motor here is a Vitarazi Monster 185, and like I said, it produces about 26 to 28 horsepower. For my weight, I'm 220. This is a great motor. This is also the lightest motor for the amount of power that you get, the greatest power to weight ratio. Or if it's not the lightest, it's very close. It's a great motor and one that a lot of people use. The larger motors, like the 250cc Polini, is extremely powerful. The downside to using those larger motors is that it's just a lot of weight on your back. The 250cc made by Polini is also water cooled, so you'll have a little radiator that sits here. Now that adds some longevity to the engine, but you have to carry that. So when you get up into those larger sizes, it's better for a wheeled launch application where you don't have to actually carry the motor on your back. There are quite a few different sizes and shapes of motors and brands. So if you're interested in knowing more about just the motors, leave a comment below and we'll make a video of just about motors and some of the major brands that are out there. Another thing to look at, especially when you're looking at paramotors and considering your first, is almost every paramotor will have this assembly here. This is called your reduction drive. It has a belt, small pulley, and a large pulley where the prop attaches. This is a direct drive, so I have, this is turning the piston when I turn the prop. Some, however, incorporate a centrifugal clutch into the pulley system so that when you're at idle, your prop is not spinning. There are some pluses and minuses to that system. The pluses are you have an added measure of safety when you're on the ground for the people around you. So people, aren't going to come up and get whacked by the prop. That's very rare for another person beside yourself to get whacked by the prop, but it does save you a little bit on that. Also, when you're landing, if you're at idle, your prop isn't spinning fast enough to cause damage to your cage in the event of a fall or some kind of mishap. The third thing that it's really good for is sometimes on launch you'll have to abort a launch for various reasons, and the wing can fall down on you and on the motor itself. If this is spinning, then the lines can get in this prop and get wrapped up and damaged. Sometimes it can also cause damage to the cage because your wing is anchored here, and if a line gets sucked into the prop and there's a lot of torque, it can suck these cage pieces down, crush them basically. So it prevents those scenarios. Something that I don't like about it, a downside, is if your pull rope, the rope you start your motor with, breaks and you're out in the middle of nowhere, or maybe you've landed somewhere and you're relying on your wing and your motor to get back home, and your pull rope breaks, this can act as your You can start it like an old prop airplane, basically spin it and it'll fire up. If there is a pulley in here with a clutch, you don't have that option. So, you know, let the debate ever rage on which is better, but it is something to consider. As far as the size of motor that you need, there's a lot of variables that come into that, a lot of factors in play. For example, your altitude. The higher you are, the less powerful your motor is. For example, I'm at 5,500 feet, and if I was to go to sea level, I would notice a significant boost in power to my motor because your prop can produce more thrust in the more dense air that's at low altitude. The other thing is the size of wing that you're flying and the type of flying that you're doing. For example, maybe all you want to do is fly very high, and so even if you're a lighter pilot, you might want a larger power plant so that you can fly to high altitudes. But as a basic rule, if I was to give a weight cutoff, I would say if you are 180 pounds or larger, you want at least 180 cc motor or larger. If you're lighter than that, there's a lot of options in the smaller ranges, 130s and 100 cc motors. And the benefit to those is they weigh a little bit less and you get a better fuel economy because they're just smaller. But if you want power in the air, these larger motors are just phenomenal. So, while there's a lot of questions to be answered there on what motor would be the best for you, that's kind of a basic rule that I go by. The other components of the motor, for example, the gas tanks, or I should say the motor system, the gas tanks, the throttle. Here's a few things to look for. This is a dual tank system. I love it because it extends my time and range. I can basically take just shy of 5 gallons in the air, and I can spend a long time flying. It's awesome. There are other models where there is just one tank, but it's very large, and you can carry a little or carry a lot. That's a great system because the more simple you can keep the whole process, the better. The only thing I don't like about a dual tank system is that it requires a siphoning from one tank to the next, which requires one of the tanks to be airtight at all times. If for any reason that's not airtight, the siphoning will stop and you won't have as much fuel as you thought. So it's never happened to me, and it would be very rare for it to happen, but I like the more simple the system can be, the better. But on the positive side, you can also remove one of these tanks and reduce a little bit of drag. Just fly with one tank. So, there's some give and take there. The throttle, let's talk about the throttle. There are a few different designs of throttle, and you wouldn't think the throttle would be a big deal, but it's actually a topic of debate a little bit, maybe not debate, but friendly banter on what system is the best. So there are two major systems. One is a trigger throttle, which is this one. That's by far my preference. The second is a bicycle throttle where you're basically holding a bicycle handle in your hand and the brake comes off here. And you use that brake and it's basically connected to your throttle. I do not care for that system. I think it takes too many fingers to operate. And also when you fall, if you fall on your hands and knees, your hand naturally goes out like this, and say you trip or something like that. That throttle is right here and it can be pressed against the ground. Your unit can go to full throttle, cause you or others harm. So while that's a small safety issue or a large safety issue depending on how you look at it, just for flying comfort, I much prefer a trigger throttle because it leaves these three fingers to control the wing. So in air, my wing toggle would be here and I'd fly like this and operate the throttle. If it's a bicycle throttle, you'd run either 2 or 3 fingers down here and control the wing with these 2 fingers. Just for coordination and for comfort and ease, I much prefer the trigger throttle, though there are probably more bicycle throttles out there than there are trigger throttles. For me, trigger throttle all the way. Another interesting throttle that has been gaining in popularity is a finger throttle, and that basically puts one finger in the throttle, and as you squeeze this way, it you know, power up and power down. Then it leaves three fingers and your whole, basically your whole hand except for that finger, free to operate the wing. For me, I saw one of those actually for the first time the other day, and we were flying. Right now it's in December, it's cold. That finger got so cold on the pilot that it was not comfortable for him, and we ended up landing. Not just because of the throttle, but when your hand is, when you isolate a finger, it's just more prone to get cold. So it's not the biggest deal in the world. I would say make sure your throttle is very robust. This throttle is about as tough as they come. I actually drove down the road the other day with this mounted on the back of my car, and I forgot to put my throttle up, and it drug down the road while I went to the post office, ran errands, and then went back to the flying field, and it's fine. It can take a ton of abuse and keep flying. I'm sad because now it's all scratched up, and my little cloth thing that holds the throttle to my hand needs to be replaced, but overall, the function of it is not damaged at all. So make sure it's tough, make sure they can survive some abuse so you don't have that as a problem. I'll tell you, when you lose your throttle in the air, it's not a good thing. Okay, so those are the main components of the Paramotor. Everything beyond that. For example, I've got a little ram mount here. This is kind of cool. I'll show you this real quick. This right here basically just uses this here, and then my phone goes on it. Then I run apps so that from the pilot seat I can see, and I can see my speed and altitude. That's really cool. I use that a lot. In fact, I hate it when I forget to put it on before I leave the ground. But it's not part of the paramotoring system. Here is my saddlebag. I'll put different things, my phone in there, gloves in case it gets cold, maybe a snack. Got to have your in-flight snacks. So convenient. A lot of pilots fly with saddlebags, and I certainly enjoy it. Over here I've got my reserve. This is basically your second chance. Let me move my chair over. This is basically your second chance. This is a traditional parachute, so it's round. If everything goes badly, everything fails, and you're falling, you'd basically throw this, and it opens very, very quickly, and you fall more gently to the ground than you would have otherwise. Some pilots choose not to fly with reserves because they're so rare to be used, but I'll tell you, I would rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. If you're going to fly a paramotor, do it the right way. Get a reserve. There's quite a few different styles and sizes out there. There are even reserves that are steerable, so once you deploy them, you can take toggles similar to your wing and guide yourself into a safe landing. And I think that's an excellent idea. In fact, I would love to upgrade this to a steerable reserve. Let's see. There's one thing I forgot. Let me turn this around. We're going to do another little piece on the motor. As far as the size of motor that you need for you, there are so many things so many questions that need to be answered. Basically, as far as the size of motor that you need, there's a lot of variables that come into that, a lot of factors in play. For example, your altitude. The higher you are, the less powerful your motor is. For example, I'm at 5,500 feet, and if I was to go to sea level, I would notice a significant boost in power to my motor because your prop can produce more thrust in the more dense air that's at low altitude. The other thing is the size of wing that you're flying and the type of flying that you're doing. For example, maybe all you want to do is fly very high, and so even if you're a lighter pilot, you might want a larger power plant so that you can fly to high altitudes. But as a basic rule, if I was to give a weight cutoff, I would say if you are 180 pounds or larger, you want at least 180 cc motor or larger. If you're lighter than that, there's a lot of options in the smaller ranges, 130s and 100 cc motors. And the benefit to those is they weigh a little bit less and you get a better fuel economy because they're just smaller. But if you want power in the air, these larger motors are just phenomenal. So, while there's a lot of questions to be answered there on what motor would be the best for you, that's kind of a basic rule that I go by. That's the basic layout of a paramotor and its components. So, like I said before, all paramotors have these basic components. They vary greatly in quality, in structural integrity, in enjoyment of use. There's just so much that goes into them. This is the best sport on the planet. Do not hesitate to get into it. If you have any other questions, please put a comment down below. Remember to subscribe and like, and we will see you on the next video.